So when I want chocolate, like, you know why.
You know why. You know what day. I need this.
Just bring it to me. So, yeah.
Okay, so I just started recording. So this will be posted on the Parkside Nutrition page and our Facebook groups as well. But for everybody who doesn't know, this is Jenn Marker. She's a nutrition coach, lots of credentials, level 1 and level 2, hormone specialist, mindset specialist, long history of personal training, right? Well over 10 years now.
Yep.
CrossFit Masters athlete. So just overall badass as far as training and nutrition. So, and local to the Pacific Northwest. So Washington, right? Are you Seattle area?
Yep.
Perfect.
About 20 minutes outside of Seattle. So Issaquah, for anyone that kind of knows. Yeah. About 20 minutes east of Seattle.
It's still local. Everyone else in our
towards the mountain, like one of the closest mountains.
Yeah, there you go. We're close. Okay, well, do you want to tell people a little bit about who you are, how you got into nutrition, a little bit about your backstory?
So as far as like how I got into nutrition and nutrition coaching, like as you said, I was doing personal training, got into CrossFit, like had clients ask me about CrossFit, and at that time it was very new, and everything that I had learned as a personal trainer was like, hey, CrossFit should be bad. And I started doing it, found out it wasn't bad, found out it was actually fun, and I was actually good at it, and did what most people do, like, okay, well, if I'm getting these benefits from doing it a little bit, like, what if I do it a lot? And just kind of started like going full bore into it, like, doubles, triples, even, like, oh, like, finish my workout, the class is starting, perfect, I'll do that too. Oh, you want to do some extra stuff afterwards? Why not? Like, this is how I'm going to get better. Not the case. Like, I had quite a few injuries that occurred, just overtraining. I was, in the mindset of like, oh, paleo, like, you do CrossFit, you do paleo, like, exactly. That was how you would be successful. And, then there's also everything, as far as like personal trainer that you hear, you got the people in the magazine that are like, oh, I consume 1,200 calories and I look like this, and that's what you should do too if you want to do this. And, just all the wrong things that were out there. And, I got to this place where I was like, oh my gosh, I'm putting in all this work. I feel like shit. But at that point, I just assumed that that's what you felt when you did CrossFit. You're just supposed to feel pains all the time.
Yeah.
And exactly, like, oh, like, that hurts. Don't worry. Everybody's injured. Everybody, like, that wants to go anywhere, like, they deal with that. And, got to this place where I was like, I'm putting in so much effort and I am not seeing the rate of returns that I would expect. And, I was putting in effort. I was eating, clean and paleo, and, then I would feel guilty having pizza here and there. But, like, my body was telling me something. I, at the time, did not quite understand what it was telling me. Until I hired a coach, and he was like, you're not eating enough. You're not eating enough carbs. And I was like, oh, carbs are going to make me fat. Like, oh God. And come to find out they didn't. And actually, like, he started me eating more carbs specifically. And I started leaning out. My injuries weren't there anymore. I started PRing in the gym again, and like, just felt better. And it was like this thing that just ignited this fire. And I was like, tell me more about this. I need to learn more about this. I want to help people because, as a personal trainer, I put people on, 12, 14, 1,600 calories because that's what I thought you were supposed to do. Like, that's what the magazine said to do. That's, they would come to me and I'd be like, okay, chicken breast and broccoli. Like, isn't that sustainable? Like, you want to do that your rest of your life? No. Like, so just a lot of misinformation. And then all of a sudden I got the right information and I felt better. And I'm like, oh my God, I have to go out and I have to help other people feel better. Cause this is, like, mind blown. Like, this, needs to be a thing, and I need to, like, help people. So that was kind of how I got into nutrition coaching and went through Jason Phillips School of Nutrition and, you know, got my L1, and then was like, I need to know more, like mindset, hormone, like just like the extra master's classes. And I'm like, tell me more, I need more. So just kind of that fire was ignited, and I just felt like I needed to go out and learn more and help people. So that was kind of how I got into it and where it kind of stemmed from. So that's kind of me in a nutshell, a brief one. But yeah, like that's how I got into it.
Yeah, and that's a really common story, is people just like under eating with CrossFit, definitely not eating enough carbs. Just for like reference, do you know like roughly how many like carbs you were eating before? You said like 1,200 calories versus your training now.
So let's see, when I first tracked my food, I was well under 200 grams of carbs a day. And putting in multiple workouts, like I would have days, and you know, looking back now, like seeing the binging kind of ups and downs that started to occur, like I get it. I get what my body was trying to do, because I would, you know, be like, oh, you know, under 2,000 calories a day, like low on the carbs, and you know, all of a sudden I'd devour a bag of trail mix. I mean, really, I'd pick out all the candy, but I mean, pretty much like, and then I'd feel bad for myself. So then I'd go and put in an extra workout the next day because, you know, I felt like I did something wrong and I needed to like work off those extra calories. And really, probably from a balance standpoint, my body was like, hey, like, if you want to keep doing this, like, you're going to need to give me more, because otherwise things are not going to go right. And I mean, during this time, I have a period, like, my doctor didn't think it was a bad thing. Well, she wasn't concerned with it because I wasn't concerned with it. Like, you know, to be honest, I didn't have a period for probably a solid 15 years. And, you know, I was on birth control, and then I was off birth control and still didn't get a period. My doctor didn't think it was a problem. She's like, oh, are you okay with it? And all right, I'm okay with it. Like, which is, from what I hear, a very common thing. Hopefully it's getting better these days. But yeah, like when I was like, that was one of the things my body was telling me, like, hey, you're not giving us enough, that we're going to make you capable of having a period. Like, you know, that's kind of what your body does. It's like, hey, like, obviously we're not in a state that reproduction would be of value to you. So guess what you don't get? And guess what that's going to mess up with? Mess up everything. So,
Absolutely.
you know, so during that time, I was definitely well under 200 grams of carbs. Now I'm upward of 320 grams of carbs. My maintenance is closer to 2,500 plus. So, you know, as far as like where I was, like I was probably, you know, I'd be around 1,400 calories one day, and then, you know, try and keep it around there, and then probably go up to like 3,000 calories one day, because my body is like, it hates me at that point in time. And then I'd feel bad and cut it back down, and you know, so it was just a whole vicious, terrible cycle. But yeah, now I'm comfortable, you know, like my current macros are about 145 on the protein, 70 fats, and about 320 carbs right now. And this is one of the things I will be talking about, as far as like that can change around your cycle. So I'm in the first phase of my cycle. So during that time, my body actually is more receptive to higher carbs and kind of high intensity training. So CrossFit is more favored during the first part of your cycle as estrogen starts to rise. And then the second half of the cycle, it's actually more favorable to have higher fats and higher proteins and slightly lower carbs. And as far as like training modality is concerned, moving more towards like a bodybuilding style workout will be what I do. So that's kind of where I'm at currently.
That's really interesting. And then I think that speaks to a lot of CrossFitters that notice those things subtly. Like you just think it's down to no motivation or,
Mm-hmm.
like, I just don't feel like doing high intensity. But it's quite often attributed to your cycle. And I think we can say like, oh, I'm not motivated today, when your body's
Mm-hmm.
really saying like, I would really not like to have this super intense CrossFit day if that's okay. And I think I
Yes.
just get more and more down
Yes.
the CrossFit rabbit hole. Like I love CrossFit too, but I've been doing more bodybuilder type stuff just because I think that's feels better right now for my body, giving it a little bit more of a break, still getting a good workout in, building muscle, all that, those good things, but in a way that I can kind of
Mm-hmm.
sustain and make sure I do every day versus like trying to beat myself up to do a super intense workout. But okay, so that's a little bit around the training around our cycle. What about the information or research you've read as far as like how to change your eating habits around your cycle? You mentioned a little bit higher carb, lower carb, protein, that type of thing.
Mm-hmm.
Is there anything specific? I know
Yes.
you know,
So,
yeah, go ahead.
yeah. So seed cycling is another thing that I do combo with my cycle to kind of help match a little bit better. So during the first phase of your cycle, during the first 2 weeks, so at menstruation, your progesterone and estrogen are at its lowest point. So generally, as women, we actually feel stronger. Like maybe that first day of your cycle, you might not feel as strong, but I would actually challenge you to kind of not look at the bloating associated with your body
Mhm.
during that time of the month and actually look at how your strength feels. I have hit and had some of the best workouts of my life the day that my period started, which isn't
Not what you,
always common for everyone. Like sometimes it like sometimes as that kind of tapers down and gets to its lowest point, as far as estrogen and progesterone is concerned, like there might be a couple days in there that aren't the best. But I personally, like, there was one of the masters qualifier workouts and it was thrusters and chest to bar, and literally right before I had to go do it, I went to the bathroom and there was my period. And I crushed that workout, and I could, like,
awesome.
I redid it a couple days later and wasn't able to do it as well. But yeah, it was one of those things I was like, ugh, like it was before I did more research into kind of what was going on with my body. But it had been something that I had noticed in the past, that, like, for me specifically, like the day that my period hit, for whatever reason, I mean, it's generally, I guess for me, mine are actually hitting that lowest point. So I
Yeah.
have less interference from progesterone and estrogen at that point. Can be different for other people, but yeah, I've had some great workouts the day of my cycle starting. So basically, like, your cycle starts, progesterone and estrogen are their lowest. The first 2 weeks of your cycle, estrogen begins to climb. It peaks right before ovulation. So during that time, estrogen actually, so you have neurotransmitters, serotonin and dopamine, that are actually, they rise kind of with estrogen. So they're affected by progesterone,
Mhm.
and then they will basically drop during that second half of your cycle. So when you do feel unmotivated, when you do feel those cravings, that is more likely because the progesterone starting to rise. So we notice the opposite effect during the second half of our, or the first half of our cycle, when estrogen starts to rise. So we actually feel much more motivated. So dopamine and serotonin are feel good hormone, or neurotransmitters. So they make you feel better. And like I'm sure you've mentioned in your gut health stuff, they are made in the gut, like 80-90%
Yeah.
of serotonin is produced within the gut. So, couple things like support your gut, listen to Allie. So during that first part of your cycle, you actually do feel more motivated. You feel stronger. Like from the nutritional standpoint, your body is more receptive to carbs. So having higher carbs during the first half of your cycle is beneficial. Not to mention, having those higher carbs will support those high intensity training sessions. So if you're someone like myself who loves CrossFit, but also recognizes the effects and kind of how it can wear on you if you continue to do it for a long period of time. Yep. Just knowing that, I know that I can hit my CrossFit workouts and kind of have my CrossFit at the beginning of my cycle and like crush it. And then, like, as I move into the second part of my cycle, I will drop my carbs down. I will bring my fats up and protein up as well to kind of support that part as far as the progesterone. So when progesterone starts to rise, your body is actually less receptive to carbs. So that's why it is favorable to have more fats and protein, and switch your training modality to something more along the lines of bodybuilding. But during the first half, estrogen is rising. It peaks right before ovulation. So for someone like myself, I love CrossFit workouts. Sometimes, I mean, I've got that love-hate for them. Like, they hurt, but afterwards you're like, I did that.
Yeah.
That sucks, but I did it. So being able to kind of recognize that and know that with my cycle, like, my goal is to work with my body. The more that I work with the body, the happier it is. Like, when you work against your body, you are creating areas of stress. And in the grand scheme of things, there's enough stress in this world that if you can work to support your body as often as you can, then you're going to be in a better place in the end. So from a training and nutrition standpoint, I've started diving more into what it looks like to work with women's cycles and where they are more favorable to increase strength, to have the CrossFit, but also have health. And that's kind of what I've done with that. So as far as seed cycling, that was another question.
Yeah.
So I actually really like seed cycling. So with seed cycling, basically you're supporting the production of hormones you need during certain parts of your cycle and the removal of hormones that you don't need during certain parts of your cycle. So for example, the first part of your cycle, you use pumpkin seed and flaxseed. So this supports the detoxification of estrogen and the increase of estrogen through your cycle, or through the first half of your cycle. And then the second half is going to be sesame seeds and sunflower seeds. So supporting progesterone and estrogen detoxification. So you grind up the seeds. I put them on like my yogurt and berries. There's a variety of recipes out there that you can find. I find that they're relatively high calorically speaking, because a lot of people are like, put them in these energy balls. So put coconut and
Delicious.
almond butter and these things in it. And I'm like, well, I'm sure they're delicious. There goes all my macros for the day. And then, if you think about it from a kind of fueling standpoint, because I've seen a few recipes and they're like pre-workout. No, I would not recommend a pre-workout that is heavy in fats or fibers, especially for those CrossFit workouts. Lactic acid does have to be moved through the digestive tract, so having something like that in there is going to slow that down. So I prefer to either do it after my workout or just not kind of put it in a high fat ball.
Yeah.
Just because, from the standpoint of, one, during the first half of your cycle, your fats are a little bit lower. Mm-hmm. So it doesn't really make sense to, throw all your fats into one of those balls.
Right. Because then that's all you get for
that is just kind of, yes, exactly. You're like, so there went all my fats. So tuna fish and broccoli for the rest of the day.
Yeah, raw broccoli. It's not great.
Yeah.
I did have a question about how much you're varying. Are you staying the same amount of calories throughout the month relatively? If you say you're on a maintenance goal, same amount of calories, and you're just bringing fat and carbs up and down, how much do you vary your carb intake throughout the cycle?
So so as far as like the carb intake is concerned, it's more like the change in fats. So change in fats, I would probably, for the first half of the cycle, probably be between like 20-25%, and then for the second half somewhere around 30-35%. So, in determining macros, it would be a matter of, whatever is left to go to carbs. As far as what's the second half of your question? Oh, overall calories. So one, it would depend on what someone's goal was. So assuming maintenance, I would actually increase calories slightly for the second half of the cycle, just slightly. Probably, 50, 100 calories, depending on the person, probably somewhere in the neighborhood of like maybe 5%. I'd have to do math on that, but it's not a lot. It's just kind of a little to help support the body.
So you said increase calories at the end of the cycle, like getting ready for menstruation?
Yes. Yes. Okay. So, one thing to think about, the body is basically creating the potential for baby in your belly. Right. So it will need some extra building blocks to help support that.
That's awesome. Have you found...
But if you're in a caloric deficit... Wait, go ahead.
Oh, sorry, go ahead. What was that caloric deficit?
Oh, I was going to say, if you're in a caloric deficit, then obviously, like, you would be adding calories to the second half of the cycle. Like, you might add a little, but not that much.
Just a little bit. Have you found you've been trying to structure and support your cycle with nutrition and training that you've had less, or even if you didn't before, like less symptoms, PMS, cravings, that type of thing?
Yes. Well, definitely less like cravings. Last month going into my, like, normally I'm like a chocolate, give me all the fats, like give me all the things coming in to my cycle. And last month I was totally fine. Like, I felt good. I didn't feel like I had any major cravings, which was really nice. Acne was down. I normally get a few here and there. Acne was down. I've noticed like sex drive is up. Like, just overall, like, my body just feels better. Like, I don't feel like I'm getting to that point where I'm just like, getting a case of the F-its and just doing whatever I want.
That's awesome. Yeah, because I think a lot of those symptoms, people are just like, oh, that's just normal, part of being a woman. And I think a lot of those symptoms can be helped by nutrition. So this is really interesting. And
sure.
This is fascinating. So I'm so glad you're like diving into this stuff, and I can like pick your brain on it. Awesome. Is there anything else that you want to cover or that comes to mind as far as that's come up throughout your research with this stuff? So far I've been taking notes. This is really fascinating.
One thing that I did find very interesting in regards to seed cycling. So if you were to start seed cycling, if you kind of didn't know where exactly your period was, it's intended that our bodies actually follow the moon cycle. So if you were to start seed cycling, you would want to start on the new moon, and then, transition at the full moon. So some of the research that I've seen has basically said that we are most fertile when we would be able to see our partner the best, which would be at the full moon.
Yeah.
Which I thought was very interesting. And there was also some information that had to do with like men being on a similar kind of fertility cycle as women, and how seed cycling could actually benefit them as well, which I thought was very interesting.
That is interesting.
So it's a family affair.
Yeah, everybody's on. I don't know. I don't want to.
Everybody in.
Yeah, I make the seed cycling bites, but I do need to like limit them because they taste delicious. They're like a little cookie or dessert. I put them in the freezer, so I have to just that little bit of a barrier, so I don't eat all of them at once.
Yeah, but I will mix half of my seeds in Kodiak cakes. And then I will like mix berries like bananas and blueberries and strawberries and put some like sugar-free maple syrup on it, and then mix the other half of the seeds in with that and put it on my pancake. Either that or Greek yogurt instead of a Kodiak cake.
That's such a good one. Yeah, because I love the seed balls, but they take up all your fat for the day, pretty much, or like a good chunk of it. And if I get a little greedy, I have another one I'm really in later in the day. So I like that. It's really helpful. Awesome. Well, I will post this to our pages and Facebook groups, and I'll put your Instagram there as well. But thanks so much for talking to me about this. When we were on that mentorship call and you started talking about this, and you could literally see me jumping up and down. I was like, yeah.
I know. I was like, yay.
I was like, we need to talk more about this. So I think people can get a lot out of this this conversation. I don't think my internet connection is the best, so I know timing was a little bit hard, but we made it work at the end. So awesome.
Yep.
Thanks so much, Jen. This was great to talk to you about this stuff.
For sure.